In the deepest part of the galaxy, where stars were old and tired, there stood a place called the Halls of Eternity. It was not built by hands. It was not made from stone or metal. It simply existed as if the universe itself had decided that this place should be. Here, the elder races gathered once every 10,000 cycles to speak of things that had happened and things that would come. The elders were not like other beings. They had watched the universe grow from a small, hot ball of fire into the vast darkness filled with stars. They had seen galaxies form and die. They had witnessed things that no mortal mind could hold without breaking dawn. The Vethkai were the oldest among them. They had no bodies made of flesh. Instead, they were living crystals that floated through space, thinking thoughts that lasted for millions of years. A single idea might begin when a star was born and finish when that same star exploded into death. They spoke not with words, but with vibrations that passed through the fabric of space itself. The Silorith were different. They were vast beings made of gas and gravity, larger than planets, who dreamed in the pulls and pushes of physics. They did not move quickly. Why would they? They had forever. A single breath might take 1,000 years. A single thought might span 10,000 dot, and then there were the Eon-born, strange creatures who existed partly outside of time itself. They could see yesterday and tomorrow at the same moment. They were difficult to look at, difficult to understand, and they preferred it that way. These three races, and others like them, formed the conclave of elder races. They were the caretakers of the galaxy. They watched. They recorded. They judged. And they were very, very bored. When you have lived for billions of years, very little surprises you. The elders had seen species rise from mud, build great cities, reach for the stars, and then fade away. It happened again and again, like waves on a beach. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. The pattern never changed. The elders had a word for these short-lived species. They called them specters, ghosts, beings so brief that they barely seemed real. By the time the conclave met again, entire civilizations had been born and died. Whole species had evolved, built empires, fought wars, and crumbled to dust. To the elders, these mortal lives were like the flicker of a candle in a storm. Pretty, perhaps. Interesting, maybe. But ultimately meaningless. In the great records of the conclave, there were millions of entries. Species catalogued and forgotten. Worlds noted and dismissed. And somewhere in those endless records, there was a small entry that no one had looked at in a very long time. The entry read, Homo sapiens. Location, Sol 3, third planet from a yellow star in the outer arm of the galaxy. Biology, carbon-based, water-dependent. Lifespan, negligible. Status, extinct, presumed. Last observed, 12,000 cycles prior. Notes, achieved basic space travel before termination. No significant cultural or technological contributions. Cleansed due to contamination risk. That was all. A few lines in a record that contained billions of entries. Humanity had lived, struggled, dreamed, and died. And all that remained was a footnote that no elder bothered to read. The Vethkai, who had ordered Earth's destruction, did not even remember doing it. 12,000 cycles was nothing to them. It was like asking a human to remember a specific breath they had taken as a child. The decision to end humanity had been made casually, without malice, without thought. Humans had been spreading too quickly, and they were messy, emotional, unpredictable. They might cause problems. So they were removed. The way one might remove a weed from a garden, the Vethkai had sent a single thought across space, and Earth's sun had flickered. Not enough to destroy the star, but enough to send a wave of fire across the inner planets. Earth had burned. Its oceans had boiled. Its atmosphere had been stripped away. Billions of humans had died in moments, never knowing why, never understanding what had killed them. And then the HFY had moved on to other matters that had been 12,000 cycles ago. The elders had not thought about humans since. Why would they? Humans were gone. Another specter faded into nothing. Another candle blown out by the cosmic wind. But something was happening now that the elders did not understand. At the edges of the galaxy, in the cold, empty spaces where no elder looked, ships were appearing. They were ugly things, crude and rough, made of metal and fire. They screamed through the void on engines that should have torn themselves apart. They used chemical fuel, burning reactions, methods so primitive that no elder had seen them in millions of years. The ships had no known signatures. They matched no species in the records. They came from nowhere, from the dark spaces between stars, from places that the elders had always believed were empty, and they were not peaceful. The first sign of trouble came from a Contours Silorith monitoring station at the galaxy's edge. The station had existed for 300,000 years, quietly watching, quietly recording. It had never been attacked. Why would anyone attack it? The elders were eternal. The elders were beyond challenge. Then the station went silent. At first, the conclave did not worry. Equipment failed sometimes. Even elder technology was not perfect. They sent a signal to check on the station. The signal was not returned. They sent a ship. The ship found wreckage. Wreckage where there had been an eternal monument, and burned into the debris in a language that no elder recognized at first were words. Simple words. Basic words. We remember Earth. The HFY Prime Resonance studied these words for a long time. It searched its ancient memory, trying to understand. Earth. The word meant something. It had meant something once. A small planet. A brief species. A footnote? Humans? Impossible. Humans were dead. Humans had been dead for 12,000 cycles. They were specters, ghosts, less than memories. They could not be here. They could not have survived. But as more reports came in, as more stations fell silent, as more wreckage was found with those same words burned into it, the elders began to feel something they had not felt in billions of years. Uncertainty. And beneath the uncertainty, something else. Something the elders had no name for, because they had never needed one. Fear. In the darkness between stars, 10,000 ships burned in formation. They were not beautiful. They were not elegant. They were weapons, pure and simple, built by beings who had spent 12,000 years preparing for this moment. On the bridge of the lead ship, a woman named Kira Vasquez looked at the stars ahead of her. Her ancestors had fled Earth in desperate, broken ships. Her grandparents had told her stories of blue skies and green grass. Her parents had raised her on a single burning purpose: return, remember, repay. She touched the patch on her shoulder. It showed Earth, blue and green, the way it had been before the fire came. Every human in the fleet wore this patch. Every human in the fleet knew the stories. Every human in the fleet carried the same fire in their heart. The elders thought they were dealing with ghosts. They were about to learn what ghosts could do. The story of humanity's survival was not written in books. It was written in blood and fire and the stubborn refusal to die. When the sun flickered and Earth burned, most of humanity died in moments. They never knew what happened. They never understood why. One moment they were living their lives, working, loving, dreaming. The next moment, fire fell from the sky and everything ended. But not everyone was on Earth. In the years before the shattering, as humans would come to call it, humanity had begun to reach for the stars. Small colonies existed on Mars. Mining stations floated in the asteroid belt. Research vessels explored the outer planets. And far from the sun, in the cold darkness beyond Pluto, a handful of generation ships were being built for Journeys to distant stars. These humans survived. They watched from millions of miles away as their home world burned. They saw the sun flicker. They saw the flash of fire that swept across the inner planets. They tried to send messages to Earth. Desperate calls for information, for help. For any sign of life, no one answered. The survivors numbered perhaps 300,000 people scattered across dozens of ships and stations. They had limited food, limited air, limited hope. By every reasonable measure, they should have died within a generation. The cold mathematics of survival said they could not make it, but humans have never been good at accepting what they should do in those first terrible years. The survivors made a choice. They could give up and fade away, another species that reached for the stars and fell short. Or they could survive, no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter how long it took. They chose survival. The generation ships, half finished and never meant to launch so soon, were pushed into the void. They headed not for the nearby stars where the elders might look, but for the spaces between. The empty places. The dark gaps in the cosmic maps where nothing interesting existed, and no, one would think to search it was a journey into hell. The ships were not ready. The technology was not tested. Thousands died in the first years from system failures, from disease, from the simple crushing weight of despair. Food ran short. Water was recycled until it tasted like metal and sadness. Children grew up in metal corridors, never knowing the feeling of wind on their faces or grass beneath their feet. But they survived. And as they survived, they remembered the elders of the fleet. Those who had been old enough to remember Earth told stories to the children. They spoke of blue oceans that stretched to the horizon. They described forests so green that looking at them made your eyes hurt. They talked about rain falling from clouds, about snow covering mountains, about the smell of flowers in spring, and they told of the fire that took it all away. The children listened. They memorized every word. And when they grew old and had children of their own, they told the same stories. Generation after generation, the memory of Earth was passed down like a sacred flame. It changed over time, as all stories do. The oceans became bluer. The grass became greener. Earth became not just a lost home, but a paradise stolen. A wound that would never heal, and the anger grew, at first. The survivors did not know who had killed their world. They thought it was a natural disaster, some cosmic accident. But as the years passed and their technology improved, they began to study what had happened. They analyzed the data from the shattering. They looked at the way the sun had flickered, the pattern of destruction. It was not natural. Someone had done this. Someone had murdered billions of people as casually as one might step on an ant. When humanity discovered the elders, the truth became clear. The ancient races who ruled the galaxy had noticed humanity. They had judged humanity, and they had decided that humanity should not exist. The anger that had been burning for generations erupted into something new, something darker, something that would not rest until it had been answered. That revenge became not just a desire, but a religion. The scattered human ships, which had been focused simply on survival, began to change. They started building weapons. They started training soldiers. They started developing technology with a single purpose in mind. Return, remember, repay. These three words became the creed of humanity. Children learned them before they learned to read. Adults whispered them before sleep. The dying spoke them with their last breaths. 12,000 years passed. In that time, humanity changed in ways that the elders could never have imagined. Living in the harsh darkness between stars, in environments that should have been impossible, humans adapted. Their bodies grew stronger, able to survive conditions that would kill their ancestors. Their minds grew sharper, pushed by the constant need to solve problems that meant life or death. and their technology advanced with desperate speed. The elders had billions of years of knowledge, but they had no urgency. They improved things slowly, over millions of years, because they had no reason to hurry. Humans had no such luxury. Every generation built on the work of the one before, pushing harder, reaching further, driven by the knowledge that one day they would return. 12,000 years of hatred, 400 generations of training, countless billions of humans who had lived and died with a single purpose burning in their hearts. Now, Commander Kira Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, unbound, and looked at the stars that had hidden her people for so long. Behind her, 10,000 ships held formation. Each ship carried the descendants of those first desperate survivors. Each ship was loaded with weapons that had been perfected over centuries. Each ship was crewed by people who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Her first officer, a man named Chen Wei, stood beside her. His family had been on the generation ship Hope's Journey, one of the first to flee the dying solar system. 14 generations of his family had served in the fleet. 14 generations had waited for this day. We are entering elder space, he said quietly. Our scouts report multiple monitoring stations ahead. Do we avoid them? Vasquez shook her head slowly. Her eyes were hard, like stones that had been worn smooth by centuries of water. But beneath the hardness, something burned. The same fire that had burned in her grandmother's eyes. The same fire that had burned in every human heart since the shattering. No, she said. We do not hide anymore. We do not run. We do not avoid. She turned to face her crew. They were young, most of them. Young in years at least. But their eyes were old. They carried the weight of 12,000 years of waiting. For 12,000 years, she said, we have lived in the darkness. Our ancestors fled to the empty places because they had no choice. They survived when survival was impossible. They kept the memory of Earth alive when everything said they should forget. They passed down the fire, generation to generation, until it reached us. Her voice grew stronger. The elders think we are ghosts. They looked at us once, decided we were nothing, and forgot we existed. They killed our world and did not even bother to remember doing it. To them, we were specters. Mortal creatures too brief to matter. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Today, we remind them that specters can burn. Today, we show them what 12,000 years of anger looks like. Today, we bring fire and rage to the doorstep of the Eternal Ones. She turned back to the view screen. The stars waited. The elder stations waited. The moment that 400 generations had worked toward was finally here. All ships, she commanded. Battle formation. We go to war. Across the fleet, 10,000 ships moved as one. Their engines burned bright against the darkness. Their weapons powered up. Systems that had been tested and retested, perfected over centuries. Designed for this single purpose. The specters of Earth were rising, and they carried 12,000 years of fire in their hearts. The Solaris monitoring station called Eternal Watch had existed for 300,000 years. It floated at the edge of elder space, a vast construction of crystal and energy that watched the darkness beyond. Nothing interesting ever happened there. Nothing interesting ever would. That was what the Solaris believed. They were wrong. The attack came without warning. One moment, the station's sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 17 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of it. The Solaris who managed the station was ancient even by elder standards. It had watched this stretch of space for 80,000 years. It had seen comets pass. It had watched distant stars flicker and die. It had never seen anything like the ships that now faced it. They were ugly. There was no other word for them. Where elder vessels were elegant, flowing things that seemed grown rather than built. These ships were hard angles and rough metal. They bristled with weapons. They glowed with barely contained power. They looked like they had been built by beings who were very angry and wanted everything to know it. The Solarith tried to communicate. It sent out signals of greeting, of peace, of curiosity. It was so old that it had forgotten what conflict felt like. It could not imagine that these strange vessels meant harm. The first missile hit the station's outer shell 17 seconds later. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 20 minutes. Eternal Watch had no weapons. Why would it? The Elders had not fought a war in millions of years. The concept of defense was almost forgotten. The station had shields, yes, but they were meant to protect against asteroids and cosmic radiation, not against the focused hatred of a species that had spent 12,000 years preparing for this moment. Human weapons tore through the shields like they were paper. Kinetic rounds moving at a fraction of light speed punched holes through ancient crystal. Nuclear warheads bloomed in silent flowers of destruction. The station, which had watched the darkness for 300 millennia, died in minutes. Before it died, the Solarith sent one final message to the Conclave. It was confused and frightened, emotions it had not felt in ages beyond counting. The message was simple: unknown attackers. Ships unlike any in records. They did not answer our greetings. They did not negotiate. They simply destroyed. They are still here. They are. The message ended. When Elder ships finally arrived at Eternal Watch, they found nothing but wreckage. The station that had existed since before humanity's ancestors climbed down from trees was now debris floating in the void. And carved into the largest piece of wreckage, burned deep into the crystal by human lasers, were 3 words: "We remember Earth." The conclave of elder races gathered in emergency session. This had never happened before. In billions of years of existence, the elders had never needed to meet outside their regular schedule. There had never been a crisis urgent enough to demand it until now. The Vethkai Prime Resonance, the oldest and most powerful of the crystal beings, addressed the assembly. Its thoughts vibrated through space, reaching every elder in the galaxy. "We face an unknown enemy," it said. "They have destroyed one of our stations. They have killed a Solarith who had existed for longer than most stars. And they claim to remember something called Earth." The word hung in the void. Earth. It meant nothing to most of the elders present. It was a name from the records, a footnote. A dead world orbiting a boring star in an unimportant part of the galaxy. The Eonborn spoke next, their voices echoing strangely as they pulled words from past and future simultaneously. "The Sol 3 species. We cleansed them 12,000 cycles ago. They were mortals. Brief lives. They should not exist. They should not," the Prime Resonance agreed. "But clearly, they do." More reports came in over the following days. Another station destroyed. Then another. Then 2 more. Each time, the same pattern. Human ships appeared from nowhere, attacked without warning, destroyed everything, and vanished back into the darkness. Each time, the same message was left behind. "We remember Earth." The elders tried to track the attackers. They sent scout ships into the void. They searched the dark spaces between stars. They found nothing. Humanity had spent 12,000 years learning to hide in the places the elders never looked. They were not going to be found easily, but they wanted to be felt. The attacks grew bolder. Human fleets struck deeper into elder space. They targeted not just monitoring stations, but mining operations, communication relays, anything that the elders had built. They did not try to capture or occupy. They simply destroyed, and they showed no mercy. The elders tried to communicate. They sent messages of peace, of negotiation, of understanding. They offered to talk, to explain, to make amends. The humans never responded. Every message was met with silence, and then with fire. After 2 months of attacks, the conclave met again. The mood had changed. Where before there had been confusion, now there was something closer to fear. The elders were not used to being challenged. They were not used to being hunted. "These creatures are insane," a Silorith declared. "They attack without reason. They refuse to communicate. They seek only destruction." No, the Prime Resonance said slowly. "They are not insane. They are angry." The concept was strange to the elders. Anger was a mortal emotion, something that brief-lived creatures felt when things did not go their way. The elders had moved beyond such things ages ago. But watching the recordings of human attacks, seeing the precision and fury with which they fought, even the Prime Resonance had to admit the truth. These humans were very, very angry, and they had every right to be. The Prime Resonance searched its ancient memory. 12,000 cycles ago, it had ordered the cleansing of Sol 3. It had been a small decision, barely worth noting. The humans were spreading too fast, breeding too quickly, asking too many questions. They might cause problems eventually. So they were removed. It had been done without malice. It had been done without thought. It had been done the way one might clean dust from a shelf. The Prime Resonance had not thought about humans since. Now, looking at the wreckage of elder stations, seeing the message burned into the debris, it realized something terrible. Mortals did not forget. Their lives were so short, so brief, that every moment burned bright in their memory. What the elders dismissed in a cosmic eye blink, mortals carried forever. The destruction of Earth, which the Prime Resonance barely remembered doing, had been passed down through 400 generations of humans. It had grown stronger with each telling. It had become not just a memory, but a purpose, a religion, a reason to exist. The elders had created something when they destroyed Earth. They had created an enemy that would never stop, never forgive, never forget. An enemy that had nothing to lose and everything to gain. An enemy that had spent 12,000 years preparing for one thing, and one thing only. Revenge. They, Prime Resonance, made a decision. It summoned the elder fleets from across the galaxy. It ordered the construction of weapons that had not been used in millions of years. It prepared for war, but deep in its ancient mind, it wondered if it was already too late. The elders had forgotten how to fight. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that could not be. Reasoned with that, the humans had forgotten nothing, and they were coming. 6 months into the war, humanity gathered its full strength for the first time. The fleet that assembled in the darkness between stars was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 15,000 warships, each one built for a single purpose. Each one carrying warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. From the smallest fighter to the massive dreadnoughts that served as command ships, every vessel hummed with the same energy, the same hatred, the same fire. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the bridge of Terra's Vengeance, the largest ship in the human fleet. He was 63 years old, which meant he had been preparing for this war for 63 years. His first memory was of his grandmother telling him stories of Earth. His last thought, when death finally came for him, would be of those same stories. He looked at the holographic display before him. It showed their target. The halls of eternity, the heart of elder power, the place where the ancient races had gathered for billions of years. The time for small attacks was over. The time for striking the edges and running away had passed. Now, humanity would show the elders what it truly meant to face a species that had nothing left to lose. Wei activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice reached every ship, every crew member, every human heart in the vast armada. For 12,000 years, he began, we have lived in shadow. We have hidden in the dark places. We have nursed our wounds and sharpened our knives. Our ancestors fled the burning of Earth with nothing but their lives and their memories. They passed down those memories to their children, who passed them to their children, who passed them to us. He paused, letting his words sink in. The elders called us specters. They looked at our brief lives and saw nothing worth remembering. They killed our world and forgot they had done it. To them, we were insects, dust, less than nothing. His voice hardened. Today, we show them what dust can do when it gathers into a storm. Today, we show them what insects can accomplish when they swarm. Today, we teach the Eternal Ones a lesson they will never forget. He raised his fist for Earth. Across 15,000 ships, the cry was echoed. For Earth. The words thundered through metal corridors and echoed in human hearts. The words that had been spoken in whispers for 12,000 years were now a battle cry. The fleet moved. The elders had prepared for humanity's attack. They knew, eventually, that the humans would come for the halls of eternity. They had gathered their own forces, such as they were. They had activated weapons that had not been used in millions of years. They had created defenses that they believed were unbreakable. They were wrong. The first wave of human ships hit the elder defenses like a hammer hitting glass. Yes, the elder shields were powerful. Yes, their weapons were sophisticated. But they were weapons designed for a different age, built by beings who had forgotten what war truly was. Human weapons were not sophisticated. Human weapons were brutal, ugly things designed by people who understood that the only purpose of a weapon was to destroy the enemy. Nuclear warheads, kinetic impactors, antimatter bombs, plasma cannons. Every terrible thing that humanity had invented in 12,000 years of preparation was now unleashed. The elder defenses held for approximately 3 hours. When they fell, the human fleet poured through like water through a broken dam. Ship after ship streamed toward the halls of eternity, weapons blazing, engines screaming. Carrying the rage of 400 generations, the Vethkai Prime Resonance watched from the halls as its defenses crumbled. It felt something it had not felt in billions of years. It felt small. It felt mortal. It felt afraid. These creatures were impossible. They should not exist. They should not be this strong. They were mortals, brief-lived things whose entire existence was a blink of an eye. How could they challenge beings who had existed since the universe was young? The Prime Resonance tried to understand. It reached out with its thoughts, trying to touch the minds of the attacking humans. What it found there was unlike anything it had ever encountered. The human minds were small, yes. They could not hold the vast thoughts that the elders took for granted. They could not see across millions of years. They could not understand the slow dance of galaxies. But within those small minds burned something that the Prime Resonance had no name for. A fire that did not dim. A purpose that did not waver. A hatred that had grown stronger, not weaker. Over 12,000 years. The humans were not fighting because they thought they could win. They were fighting because they could not do anything else. The memory of Earth had become part of them, woven into their very being. They would die fighting rather than live forgetting. The Prime Resonance understood finally what it had created when it ordered Earth's destruction. It had created a species with nothing to lose and everything to prove. A species that measured time not in millions of years, but in heartbeats, and made every heartbeat count. A species that could not afford to wait, could not afford to be patient, could not afford to be subtle. A species that burned hot and bright, like the flames that had consumed their world. The halls of eternity had stood since before Earth's sun first ignited. They had witnessed the birth and death of countless stars. They had seen permanent, eternal, beyond the reach of mortal hands. Human missiles did not care about eternity. Human bombs did not respect permanence. Human rage did not acknowledge the impossible. The halls began to burn. Commander, Vasquez led the assault on the central chamber. Her ship, Prometheus Unbound, carved a path through the remaining Elder defenses with weapons that should not have worked against beings of pure thought and energy. But human scientists had spent 12,000 years studying the Elders, learning their weaknesses, developing weapons specifically designed to hurt things that had never been hurt before. The prime resonance manifested before her, its crystalline form flickering with something that might have been desperation. "You are mortal," it said, its thoughts vibrating through the ship's hull. "Your lives are measured in decades. We have existed for eons. We have seen the birth of stars. We have witnessed the death of galaxies. What can creatures like you possibly hope to accomplish against us?" Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That is exactly the point," she replied. "You have existed for eons. You have had eons to grow soft, eons to forget what it means to struggle, eons to become so confident in your eternity that you forgot mortals can bite." She leaned forward. "Every human on these ships has known, since childhood, that they would probably die in this war. We accepted that. We welcomed it, because we knew that even if we died, we would hurt you first. We would make you feel what our ancestors felt when their world burned." The prime resonance tried to respond, but Vasquez was not finished. "You have eternity," she said. "We have purpose. Let me tell you something that your billions of years of existence never taught you." Her eyes were hard as diamonds and hot as suns. "Purpose burns hotter." She gave the order. Human weapons spoke in the heart of the halls of eternity. The seat of elder power for billions of years erupted in fire. The flames were human. And they were beautiful. The war lasted 3 years. In cosmic terms, this was nothing. A blink, a heartbeat. The Elders had existed for billions of years. 3 years should have been meaningless to them. But 3 years of constant attack, of endless destruction, of watching their stations burn and their fleets scatter, changed things. 3 years of facing an enemy that would not stop, would not negotiate, would not show mercy, broke something in the Eternal Ones. The Elders discovered that eternity had a price. When you existed for billions of years, you forgot how to adapt. You forgot how to change. You forgot how to face something new. Humanity had never stopped adapting. When the Elders deployed psychic attacks, weapons that could shatter mortal minds with a thought, human scientists developed shields. They worked for weeks without sleep, driven by the knowledge that failure meant extinction. The shields worked. Not perfectly, but enough. When the Eon-born tried to use their power over time, reaching into the past to prevent human ships from launching, they found that humans had prepared for that too. 12,000 years of paranoid planning had covered every possibility. The Eon-born's time manipulations were countered by technology that should not have existed, built by scientists who had known they might need it someday. When the Silureth tried to crush human fleets with gravitational waves, the humans simply spread out, became too scattered to target. They were not trying to hold territory. They were trying to hurt the enemy. Territory could wait. Every weapon the Elders deployed was met with a counter. Every strategy was answered. Every attack was survived and repaid tenfold. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't. Earth was already gone. Their home was already ashes. Death held no fear for people whose entire purpose was revenge. The Elders, who had everything to lose, found that they did not know how to risk it. In the 3rd year of the war, the conclave of Elder races sent a message to the human fleet. It was the first time in billions of years that the Elders had asked for anything. They were not demanding. They were not commanding. They were begging. "We wish to discuss peace," the message said. "We wish to end this conflict. Please respond." Admiral Chun Wei read the message on the bridge of Terra's Vengeance. He was older now, tired in ways that had nothing to do with age. He had lost friends in this war. He had watched ships full of people he knew die in silence against the darkness. He had ordered attacks knowing that thousands of humans would not return, but he had never wavered. None of them had. He looked at his officers. What do you think? Commander Vasquez, who had risen to be his second in command after leading the assault on the halls of eternity, considered the question. They want to talk because they are losing. If we give them time to recover, they might find a way to fight back. Chun nodded slowly. That was true. The elders were ancient beyond measure. Given time, they might develop new weapons, new strategies. They might remember how to wage war, but the admiral was tired. His people were tired. They had been fighting for 3 years, and before that, they had been preparing for 12,000. That was a long time to carry rage in your heart. We will talk, he decided. But we will not stop fighting until we have what we came for. The talks took place in the ruins of the halls of eternity. What had once been a monument to eternal power was now a burned shell, its ancient crystals blackened and cracked. Human soldiers stood guard in corridors that had never known footsteps before. The Vethkai, prime resonance, represented the elders. It was diminished now, its crystalline form smaller and darker than it had been before the war. The confidence that had defined it for billions of years was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like humility. Commander Vasquez represented humanity. She stood in the chamber where the conclave had once gathered, surrounded by the wreckage of eternity. She felt no satisfaction. She felt no joy. She felt only the weight of 12,000 years of memory. The prime resonance spoke first. We wish to understand. How did you survive? We cleansed your world. We darkened your sun. You should not exist. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. Then she answered, You killed billions of our people in an instant. You destroyed our home without warning, without explanation, without mercy. And then you forgot about us. We were so small, so brief, so meaningless to you that you did not even remember doing it. She stepped closer to the ancient being. That was your mistake. You thought our brief lives made us weak. You did not understand that our brief lives made us strong. We cannot wait for problems to solve themselves. We cannot hope that enemies will forget about us. We cannot afford patience. Her voice hardened. When you killed Earth, you gave us something no other species has ever had. You gave us a wound that would not heal, a memory that would not fade, a purpose that burned brighter with every generation that passed. She looked around at the ruins of the halls of eternity. You gave us revenge as a birthright, and we passed it down, parent to child, for 400 generations, until it became the very core of who we are. The prime resonance was silent for a long time. Then it asked the question that had haunted it since the war began. What do you want? Vasquez's answer was simple. We want you to remember. The treaty that ended the war was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The elders, who had ruled unchallenged for billions of years, accepted terms from a species they had tried to exterminate. They gave humanity a region of space to call their own. Not the space they had hidden in for 12,000 years, but real space, good space, with stars and planets that could support life. Room to grow. Room to rebuild. They agreed to never again cleanse a species without cause. The casual genocide that had destroyed Earth would never happen again. The elders would remember that even brief lives had value, and they agreed to remember Earth. Every cycle. When the conclave gathered, they would speak the name of the world they had destroyed. They would acknowledge what they had done. They would carry the memory of their crime, as humanity had carried the memory of their loss. It was not justice. Nothing could bring back the billions who had died. Nothing could restore the blue skies and green grass that humanity's ancestors had known. The wound would never fully heal. But it was something in the years that followed. Humanity rebuilt. They colonized 1,000 worlds, each one a monument to survival. They built cities and farms and schools, places where children could grow up under open skies without fear. And in every school, in every home, in every gathering place, the stories were still told. The children learned of Earth, of the shattering, of the long exile, of the war. They learned what their ancestors had suffered and what they had achieved. But the stories had a different ending now. They did not end with fire and rage. They ended with something that 12,000 years of hatred had finally made possible. Hope. Commander Vasquez, old now and tired, stood on the first world that humanity colonized after the war. She watched children play in a park, laughing and running under a yellow sun not so different from the one that had warmed Earth. A young boy ran up to her. He could not have been more than 6 years old. He looked up at her with curious eyes. "Are you the one who fought the elders?" he asked. She smiled. "I was one of many." The boy considered this. "My teacher says we used to be very angry. She says we carried fire in our hearts for a long time." Vasquez knelt down to look him in the eye. "We did. For 12,000 years, we remembered our pain and let it burn inside us. It kept us alive when everything said we should die. Is the fire gone now?" the boy asked. Vasquez looked at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. It reminded her of fire. It reminded her of Earth. "No," she said softly. "The fire will never be gone. But we have learned to use it for something other than burning. We have learned to use it to build, to grow, to live." She stood up and put her hand on the boy's shoulder. "The elders called us specters once. Ghosts too brief to matter. They were wrong. We were never ghosts. We were seeds, waiting for the right moment to grow." She looked out at the world humanity had built. Cities rose in the distance. Ships flew overhead. People laughed and worked and lived. "We arrived bearing flame and rage," she said. But that was not the end of our story. It was only the beginning. The boy ran off to play with his friends. Vasquez watched him go, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt at peace. The specters of Earth had become something more. They had become a people with a future as bright as the flame they had carried for so long, and the galaxy would never forget them again.